Good afternoon, guys. I have discussion A for you. We're discussing older adults who grew up in orphanages and children's homes, how later on in life they have trauma. Okay, so we're going to go through that today for A. So please join me for today's discussion A. Here we go. A new study shows that older adults who grew up in orphanages, children's homes, or foster care often carry lifelong trauma that strongly shapes how they experience aging and age related care. What the study is about. The research led by the National Center for Healthy Aging with Monash University and Peninsula Health examined the experience experiences of older care leavers, sometimes called forgotten Australians. These are adults who spent part of their childhood in institutional or out of home care before the 1980s. Through interviews with 24 older care leavers, the study explored how early institutional trauma continues to influence their well-being and their interactions with aged care systems. The key findings: fear of reinstitutionalization. One of the most pressing concerns is the fear that entering residential aged care will replicate the institutional environments where many experience neglect, abuse, or loss of autonomy. Shared rooms, rigid routines, and limited control can act as a trigger. Distinct aging experiences. Participants often faced premature aging, chronic health issues, and deep mistrust of care systems, patterns linked to lifelong disadvantage and trauma. Emotional and psychological impacts. Many expressed distress at the idea of nursing homes, with some describing a pre, uh, preference to remain at home, even if it meant fewer services. Why this matters for the aged care industry. The study emphasizes that older care leavers are not just another subgroup of older adults. These histories create unique vulnerabilities and require tailored approaches. The research calls for aged care systems to recognize this population as a priority group and design services that avoid re traumatization. Recommendations for aged care providers. Trauma informed care. Staff should receive training in trauma literacy, understanding personal boundaries, communication sensitivities, and common triggers. Policies that protect autonomy. Care environments should minimize institutional features and maximize choice, privacy, and control. Specialized supports. The study recommends developing caregiver informed, person centered models and strengthening quality in assurance to ensure safety and dignity. Collaboration with advocacy groups. The research was conducted with organizations like the Caregivers Australia Network or CLAN, highlighting the importance of lived experience, partnerships, the bigger picture. This study reinforces a critical truth. Childhood institutionalization leaves long shadows for many older care leavers. Aging is not just a medical or social process. It's a deep, it is deeply tied to memory, identity, and the need for emotional safety. Aged care systems that understand this can better uphold dignity and prevent re-traumatization. Here is a clear, grounded explanation of the text you highlighted, drawn directly from the content of the PDF you're viewing. What the text is saying in plain language, the passage introduces a new study showing that childhood institutionalization leaves deep, lifelong effects, and these effects become especially visible when people enter old age and interact with the aged care system. The study focuses on older care leavers, often called forgotten Australians, people who grew up in orphanages, children's homes, or foster care before 1980s. Researchers interviewed 24 of them and found a consistent theme. As they age, many fear being reinstitutionalized. Why this fear is so significant. These individuals, residential aged care facilities can feel eerily similar to the institutions they were where they once experienced neglect, abuse, or loss of autonomy. The study notes that shared rooms, rigid routines, and lack of control can trigger traumatic memories. Many participants described distress at the idea of entering aged care because it mirrors the environments where they were harmed as children. Their aging experience is not the same as the general populations. It's shaped by early trauma, disrupted attachments, and lifelong mistrust of institutions. What the study recommends for the aged care sector. The researchers argue that older care leavers should be formally recognized as a priority population in aged care planning. They call for trauma informed workforce training. Staff need to understand personal boundaries, communication sensitivities, common trauma triggers, how routine care tasks may be misinterpreted by someone with institutional trauma, policies that protect dignity and autonomy. This includes access to private spaces, control over meals and daily routines, avoiding environments that resemble institutional settings, structural and policy changes. Australia's new Aged Care Act and the support at home model may help by giving people more control and allowing them to stay in familiar surroundings. A human example, Alan's story. The article includes a case study of Alan, an 85-year-old forgotten Australian. His story illustrates the lifelong impact of institutionalization. Taken from his mother as an infant, labeled a ward of the state, experienced abuse, overwork, and deprivation, denied education, misled into believing his parents were dead, blocked from opportunities like joining the Air Force, still carries anger and grief decades later. Even now, after a fall forced him into aged care, he continues advocating for recognition and justice for forgotten Australians. The bigger message, the study makes one thing clear: childhood trauma doesn't fade with age, it shapes how people experience aging care safely and dignity. safety, and dignity for older caregivers. Entering aged care isn't just service transition. It can feel like returning to the very systems that harm them. The research argues policymakers and providers to design care that acknowledges this history and actively prevents re-traumatization. Okay, guys, that's A for you. Give me a few minutes. I might try and do a B in a few. For now, Gator Wellness, take care, folks.